What happens when a seemingly ordinary act of vandalism, the destruction of a young black teen's bicycle, unleashes a wave of unexpected consequences, revealing the deep-seated racism of a community and the surprising power of kindness. The sun, a fat orange orb just peeking over the horizon, cast long shadows across Jordan's street. He hummed along to the upbeat rhythm pulsing from his earbuds, the melody a cheerful counterpoint to the crisp morning air. His breath plumed out in small, white clouds, a testament to the lingering chill of autumn. He loved these mornings, the quiet solitude before the school day's bustle, the feeling of freedom as he pedaled his bike, a sleek, midnight blue machine he'd painstakingly saved up for. He called it Midnight Rider, a name whispered with affection every time he glanced down at the gleaming frame. Today was especially exciting. It was Friday, the end of a long week, and Mr. Fitzwilliam, his history teacher, had promised to finally reveal the results of their history fair project. Jordan and his partner, Maya, had poured their hearts into their presentation on the Harlem Renaissance, and he felt a nervous flutter of anticipation in his chest. He imagined the satisfying weight of the first-place trophy, the proud smile on Maya's face, and the approving nod from Mr. Fitzwilliam. The thought spurred him on, his legs pumping rhythmically, the wheels of Midnight Rider spinning smoothly against the pavement. He weaved expertly through the quiet residential streets, his movements fluid and practiced. He knew every crack in the sidewalk, every dip in the road, every shortcut through the neighborhood park. He'd been riding this bike since he was 10, and it felt like an extension of himself, a faithful companion through countless adventures. He remembered the day his dad had helped him assemble it, the shared pride in their accomplishment, the promise of countless miles to be ridden together. A bittersweet pang of longing tugged at him. His dad had been transferred to a new job out of state a year ago, and the distance felt immense. But the memories of those rides, the shared laughter and quiet companionship, remained vivid and comforting. The park was a kaleidoscope of autumn colors. The leaves, once vibrant green, now blazed with fiery reds, oranges, and yellows, carpeting the ground in a breathtaking mosaic. He slowed his pace, enjoying the serene beauty of the scene. A small family of squirrels chased each other up a towering oak tree, their tiny claws scrabbling against the rough bark. A lone robin perched on a branch, its feathers ruffled by a gentle breeze. He inhaled deeply, the crisp air filling his lungs with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. It was a perfect morning, a perfect prelude to a perfect day. He continued his journey, the park now behind him, the familiar rhythm of his pedaling a soothing mantra. He passed Mrs. Gable's house, her prize-winning roses still blooming despite the chill, their velvety petals a vibrant contrast to the muted colors of the surrounding foliage. He smiled to himself, remembering the time he'd accidentally knocked over one of her rose bushes while riding his bike, the ensuing lecture, and the subsequent apology. Mrs. Gable, despite her initial sternness, had a kind heart, and he'd learned a valuable lesson about responsibility that day. He was nearing the main road, the final stretch before school. The familiar hum of traffic was now audible, a low drone that gradually intensified as he approached the intersection. He glanced at his watch. He was right on schedule. He had plenty of time to reach school, lock up his bike, and make it to class before the bell. A surge of confidence filled him. Today was going to be a good day. He could almost taste the victory, the sweet satisfaction of a job well done. He adjusted his backpack, the weight of his history project a comforting presence on his shoulders. He was ready. He was excited. Then, everything changed. One moment, Jordan was humming along to his music. The next, a wall of bodies surrounded him. He barely had time to register the shock before he was yanked off his bike, the sudden impact sending a jolt through his body. Midnight Rider crashed to the ground with a sickening thud, the metallic screech of twisted metal a harsh counterpoint to the cheerful melody still playing in his ears. He scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs, his mind struggling to process the sudden assault. For figures loomed over him, their faces contorted in sneers. He recognized them instantly. Mark, the ringleader, a tall, lanky boy with a perpetually arrogant smirk. Kevin, his hulking sidekick, known for his brute strength and short temper, and two other boys, their identities less clear in the blur of adrenaline and fear. They were the school's resident bullies, notorious for their cruelty and their penchant for targeting anyone deemed different. And Jordan, being black in a predominantly white school, was frequently on their radar. Mark stepped forward, his eyes glinting with malice. "Well, well, well," he sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Look what the cat dragged in. Our little chocolate bunny." The words hung in the air, heavy with contempt, the casual racism a familiar sting. Jordan's stomach clenched. He'd endured their taunts before, the petty insults, the occasional shove, the constant feeling of being watched, judged, and ultimately unwelcome. But this was different. This was an escalation. This was violence. Kevin, ever the enforcer, began to kick at Midnight Rider, his heavy boots crushing the already damaged frame. The bike, once a symbol of freedom and independence, was now being systematically destroyed, its once gleaming surface marred by dents and scratches. Jordan watched in horror, a wave of helplessness washing over him. He tried to intervene to protect his bike, but the boys were too quick, too strong. "Leave it alone," Jordan shouted, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. But his words were lost in the cacophony of their laughter, their jeers, and the sickening crunch of metal. Mark grabbed Jordan's backpack, tossing it into the nearby bushes. He then proceeded to systematically dismantle the bike, ripping off the handlebars, bending the wheels, and snapping the chain. Each deliberate act of destruction felt like a personal blow, a targeted assault not just on his property, but on his sense of self. "You think you're so cool, riding your fancy bike," Mark sneered, his breath hot on Jordan's face. "But you're just a nigger on a bicycle, and we're going to make sure you never ride again." The racial slur, sharp and brutal, landed like a physical blow. It wasn't just the words themselves, but the casual cruelty, the utter lack of remorse, that stung the most. The other boys joined in, echoing Mark's insults, their words laced with venom and hatred. They called him names, mocked his appearance, and made crude jokes about his race. Jordan stood there, frozen, his body trembling, his mind reeling from the onslaught of verbal abuse. He felt a burning shame, a deep humiliation that threatened to consume him. He wanted to run, to disappear, to escape the torrent of hate that was engulfing him. But he couldn't. He was trapped, surrounded, and utterly defenseless. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the boys grew bored with their destructive game. They tossed the mangled remains of Midnight Rider into a ditch, leaving Jordan standing alone amidst the debris, his clothes torn, his body bruised, and his spirit crushed. They walked away, their laughter echoing in the air, a cruel soundtrack to his despair. He was left alone, stranded, humiliated, and utterly broken. The cheerful melody from his earbuds, still playing faintly, felt like a cruel mockery of his situation. The perfect morning had turned into a nightmare. The silence that followed the bully's departure was deafening. The only sounds were the frantic beating of Jordan's heart and the ragged gasps of his breath. He stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of his bike, his body trembling, his mind reeling. The world seemed to shrink, to narrow down to the immediate vicinity of the mangled metal and the muddy ditch where his once-beloved Midnight Rider now lay. He felt exposed, vulnerable, utterly alone. He sank to the ground, the cold dampness of the earth seeping into his jeans. He didn't cry. Not yet. The shock was too profound, the emotional impact too overwhelming to allow for the release of tears. He simply sat there, staring blankly at the twisted metal, the broken pieces a stark reflection of his own shattered spirit. The words the bullies had hurled at him echoed in his ears, each slur a venomous barb piercing his soul. He'd heard similar taunts before, the casual racism, the subtle digs, the constant feeling of being an outsider. But this time it was different. This time, the hate had been amplified, intensified, made tangible by the violence inflicted on his bike. It was more than just words. It was an act of aggression, a deliberate attempt to diminish him, to break him. He thought of his father, the countless hours they'd spent together working on Midnight Rider, the shared pride in their accomplishment. The memory brought a fresh wave of pain, a sharp pang of loss. His father was far away, and he couldn't share this moment of despair, this crushing sense of violation. The distance felt insurmountable, a chasm separating him from the comfort and support he desperately craved. He reached into his pockets, his fingers brushing against the smooth surface of his phone. He considered calling his mother, but the thought felt overwhelming. He didn't want to burden her with his distress, to add to her already heavy load. She worked tirelessly to provide for him, and he didn't want to add to her worries. He was supposed to be strong, resilient. He was supposed to be able to handle this, but he couldn't. The weight of the situation was crushing him. He felt a profound sense of injustice, a burning anger that simmered beneath the surface of his despair. Why him? Why his bike? Why this relentless barrage of hate? He didn't understand. He just wanted to be accepted, to be seen as an equal, to be valued for who he was, not for the color of his skin. The anger began to bubble, a slow, insidious burn that gradually consumed the numbness. He clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. He wanted to lash out, to retaliate, to make them pay for what they'd done. But he knew that wouldn't solve anything. It would only escalate the situation, leading to more pain, more suffering. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging within him. He focused on his breathing, inhaling slowly, exhaling deeply. He needed to find a way to cope, a way to process this trauma, a way to regain his sense of self. He was more than just a target for their hate. He was Jordan, a bright, capable, and resilient young man. He wouldn't let them break him. He would find a way to overcome this. But right now, all he could do was sit amidst the wreckage, the cold earth a stark reminder of his vulnerability, and wait. Wait for something, anything, to change. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street, the light fading as the day edged towards evening. Jordan remained where he was, slumped against the ditch, the mangled remains of Midnight Rider a stark reminder of the violence he had endured. The initial shock had begun to subside, replaced by a dull ache of despair. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't even cried. He was simply numb, a hollow shell of his former self. He hadn't noticed the approach of the approaching figure. He was lost in his own thoughts, his mind replaying the events of the past hour, the cruel words, the brutal acts of destruction. He was so consumed by his own pain that he didn't register the sound of footsteps on the pavement, the gentle rumble of a vehicle slowing to a stop nearby. It was only when a shadow fell across him that he looked up. He saw a man standing over him, his silhouette framed against the fading light. He was an older black man, his face etched with the lines of time and experience, his eyes radiating a quiet wisdom. He was wearing a worn denim jacket and work boots, his hands calloused and strong. He looked like someone who had seen a lot, weathered many storms, and emerged stronger on the other side. The man knelt beside Jordan, his gaze gentle and understanding. He didn't speak immediately, didn't rush to offer platitudes or empty reassurances. He simply sat there, his presence a silent comfort in the midst of Jordan's despair. He exuded an aura of calm, a sense of quiet strength that seemed to permeate the air. After a moment, the man spoke, his voice soft and measured. "Son," he said, his tone laced with empathy, "you look like you've been through something." His words were simple, but they held a depth of understanding that resonated with Jordan's pain. Jordan didn't respond immediately. He just stared at the man, his gaze searching, trying to decipher the kindness in his eyes. He'd encountered countless adults in his life, teachers, counselors, even police officers, but none of them had ever offered him this level of genuine concern. This man, a stranger, seemed to understand his pain without needing an explanation. Finally, Jordan spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "They broke my bike," he said, his words choked with emotion. He didn't mention the racial slurs, the hateful words, the deliberate attempt to humiliate him. He couldn't bring himself to articulate the full extent of his pain. The man nodded, his eyes filled with compassion. "I can see that," he said. "It looks like they did a number on it." He gestured towards the mangled remains of Midnight Rider, his gaze lingering on the twisted metal. He didn't express shock or outrage. He simply acknowledged the damage, his acceptance a balm to Jordan's wounded spirit. "My name is Silas," the man continued. I own the bike shop down the street. I saw you sitting here, and I thought I'd see if you were all right." He paused, giving Jordan time to process his words. He didn't press for details, didn't pry into Jordan's pain. He simply offered his presence, his quiet support. Jordan looked up at Mr. Silas, a flicker of hope igniting within him. This wasn't just a stranger offering empty words of comfort. This was a man who understood what it meant to repair things, to mend broken pieces. This was a man who could potentially fix not just his bike, but also his shattered spirit. And in that moment, amidst the wreckage and the despair, Jordan felt a glimmer of hope. Mr. Silas sat beside Jordan, his gaze steady and reassuring. He didn't rush to offer solutions or pronouncements. He simply allowed Jordan to process his emotions, to absorb the weight of his experience. The silence wasn't awkward or uncomfortable. It was a shared space of understanding, a quiet acknowledgement of the pain that had been inflicted. After a while, Mr. Silas gently reached out and placed a hand on Jordan's shoulder. The touch was light, yet firm, conveying both empathy and strength. "Tell you what, son," he said, his voice calm and soothing. "Let's get you out of here. We can talk more in my shop." He helped Jordan to his feet, supporting him as he struggled to regain his balance. Jordan's legs felt weak and unsteady, his body still trembling from the lingering effects of the attack. As they walked towards Mr. Silas's shop, Jordan couldn't help but notice the way Mr. Silas moved, his gait steady and purposeful, his demeanor projecting an aura of quiet strength and resilience. The shop, nestled in a quiet corner of the neighborhood, was small but inviting. The air was filled with the comforting scent of oil, grease, and freshly polished metal. Tools hung neatly on the walls, their gleaming surfaces reflecting the soft light filtering through the window. It was a sanctuary, a place of order and calm amidst the chaos of the outside world. Mr. Silas carefully examined Midnight Rider, his experienced hands gently turning the mangled frame. He didn't speak, but his expressions conveyed a deep understanding of the damage, a quiet acknowledgement of the violence that had been inflicted. He identified each broken part, each twisted piece of metal, his assessment precise and thorough. He didn't rush the process. He took his time, allowing Jordan to watch, to observe the expertise and precision of his work. After a few minutes, Mr. Silas straightened up, his gaze meeting Jordan's. "It's pretty badly damaged," he said, his voice soft but firm. "The frame's bent, the wheels are ruined, the handlebars are snapped. It's going to take some work to fix this." Jordan braced himself for the next words, expecting a long list of repairs and an equally long bill. He knew his parents couldn't afford to replace the bike, let alone repair it. The thought of losing Midnight Rider, of losing that symbol of his independence and freedom, brought a fresh wave of despair. But Mr. Silas's next word surprised him. "But don't you worry," he said, a warm smile spreading across his face. "I'm going to fix it for you, free of charge." Jordan stared at him, speechless. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. A free repair? After everything that had happened, after the humiliation and the pain, this act of unexpected kindness felt overwhelming. Tears welled up in his eyes, this time tears of relief, gratitude, and a dawning sense of hope. "I know things have been tough for you, son," Mr. Silas continued, his voice gentle and understanding. "And I want to help. Consider this a small act of kindness, a way of saying that you're not alone." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "This bike is more than just metal and wheels. It's a symbol of your freedom, your independence. And I'm not going to let those bullies take that away from you." Jordan could only nod, his throat choked with emotion. He couldn't find the words to express his gratitude, his relief, his dawning sense of hope. In that moment, surrounded by the scent of oil and grease, amidst the tools and the machinery, Jordan felt a shift within him. He was still hurting, still reeling from the attack, but a small spark of resilience had been ignited, a flicker of hope in the darkness. He knew he wasn't alone. He had Mr. Silas, and that made all the difference. Jordan spent the next few hours in Mr. Silas's workshop, a small but well-organized space filled with the comforting aroma of oil and grease. He watched, mesmerized, as Mr. Silas worked on Midnight Rider, his movements precise and efficient. Each action was deliberate, each repair meticulously executed. It wasn't just about fixing a bike. It was about restoring something broken, about mending not just metal but also a spirit. Mr. Silas worked with a quiet intensity, his hands moving with a practiced ease that spoke of years of experience. He explained each step of the repair process, his voice calm and informative. He spoke of the different types of metal, the intricacies of the bike's mechanics, the importance of precision and attention to detail. Jordan listened intently, absorbing the information like a sponge. He'd always been mechanically inclined, but he'd never had the opportunity to learn from someone with Mr. Silas's expertise. As Mr. Silas worked, he shared stories from his own life. He spoke of his childhood, his dreams, his struggles. He talked about his love for bikes, how they had been his escape, his freedom, his way of navigating the complexities of life. He spoke of the importance of hard work, perseverance, and the unwavering belief in oneself. He didn't shy away from the challenges he had faced, but he always emphasized the importance of resilience, of finding strength in the face of adversity. Jordan found himself drawn to Mr. Silas's stories, his words resonating with his own experiences. He saw a reflection of himself in Mr. Silas's journey, a shared understanding of the challenges of growing up black in a world that often felt hostile and unwelcoming. Mr. Silas's words weren't just about fixing bikes. They were about fixing lives, about mending broken spirits, about fostering resilience in the face of adversity. Mr. Silas shared stories of his own encounters with racism, the subtle indignities, the overt acts of aggression. He didn't dwell on the negativity, but he acknowledged its presence, highlighting the importance of recognizing injustice and fighting against it. He spoke of the strength of community, the importance of supporting one another, the power of collective action. His words were a balm to Jordan's wounded spirit, a reassurance that he wasn't alone in his struggle. As the hours passed, a bond began to form between them, a connection forged in shared experience and mutual respect. It wasn't just the repair of a bicycle. It was the mending of a broken spirit, the nurturing of a wounded soul. Jordan found himself opening up to Mr. Silas, sharing details of the attack that he hadn't been able to articulate before. He spoke of the humiliation, the anger, the despair. Mr. Silas listened patiently, his eyes filled with empathy and understanding. By the time the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the workshop, Midnight Rider was almost fully repaired. The bike, once a symbol of destruction and despair, was now gleaming, its midnight blue frame restored to its former glory. But the transformation extended beyond the bike itself. Jordan, too, had undergone a transformation. He was still hurting, but the numbness had begun to subside, replaced by a growing sense of hope and resilience. He had found a mentor, a confidant, a friend. He had found Mr. Silas. And in that moment, he knew he wasn't alone. With Midnight Rider almost fully repaired, a comfortable silence settled over the workshop. The rhythmic clinking of tools, the whirring of the polishing machine had ceased. Mr. Silas wiped his brow, a satisfied smile playing on his lips. He turned to Jordan, his gaze warm and understanding. "There," he said, gesturing towards the gleaming bike. "Good as new." Jordan walked over to Midnight Rider, running his hand along the smooth, polished frame. The feeling of the cool metal against his skin was strangely comforting, a tangible symbol of restoration and renewal. He felt a surge of gratitude towards Mr. Silas, a profound sense of relief washing over him. The bike was more than just a machine. It was a symbol of his freedom, his independence, his identity. And Mr. Silas had painstakingly restored it, not just the metal, but also the spirit it represented. But the relief was fleeting. The weight of the attack, the sting of the racial slurs, the humiliation of being targeted, still lingered. He looked at Mr. Silas, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger, sadness, and a deep-seated sense of injustice. He knew he needed to share the full story, to articulate the pain that had been inflicted. He began to speak, his voice hesitant at first, then growing stronger as he recounted the events of the afternoon. He described the ambush, the violence, the hateful words. He spoke of the fear, the humiliation, the overwhelming sense of helplessness. He didn't hold back. He poured out his heart, his emotions raw and unfiltered. Mr. Silas listened patiently, his gaze unwavering, his silence a testament to his empathy and understanding. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. He simply allowed Jordan to speak, to express his pain, to release the pent-up emotions that had been consuming him. When Jordan finished, a long silence hung in the air. Mr. Silas didn't rush to offer advice or solutions. He simply sat there, absorbing the weight of Jordan's story, acknowledging the pain and the injustice. Then he spoke, his voice soft but firm. "Son," he said, "what happened to you wasn't right. It wasn't fair, and it wasn't okay." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of years of experience, a deep understanding of the insidious nature of racism. He didn't minimize Jordan's pain. He validated it, acknowledging the profound impact of the attack. "Those boys," Mr. Silas continued, "they acted out of ignorance, out of fear, out of a deep-seated hatred. But their actions don't define you. Your worth isn't diminished by their cruelty. You are strong, you are resilient, and you deserve to be treated with respect." Mr. Silas then offered Jordan guidance, not just on how to deal with the immediate aftermath of the attack, but also on how to navigate the complexities of racism, to find strength in the face of adversity, to build resilience and self-confidence. He spoke of the importance of community, of finding allies, of standing up for oneself and for others. He didn't offer easy answers or quick fixes. He offered wisdom, support, and a path forward. He helped Jordan see the situation not just as a personal tragedy, but as an opportunity for growth, for learning, for change. He helped Jordan understand that he wasn't alone in his struggle. He had Mr. Silas, and he had the strength within himself to overcome this challenge. The next day, Mr. Silas and Jordan sat in the workshop, the repaired midnight rider gleaming in the afternoon sun. The atmosphere was different from their previous meetings. There was still a sense of quiet understanding, but now there was also a growing sense of purpose, a shared determination to address the injustice that had been inflicted. Mr. Silas, drawing on his extensive knowledge of the community, helped Jordan identify the bullies. He knew their names, their families, their habits. He knew where they hung out, who their friends were, and what their vulnerabilities were. He didn't condone violence or retaliation, but he believed in accountability, in making sure those responsible for their actions face consequences. Mr. Silas's approach was measured and strategic. He wasn't about impulsive reactions or seeking revenge. He emphasized the importance of a calm, controlled confrontation, focusing on holding the bullies accountable for their actions without resorting to violence. He helped Jordan articulate his feelings, to express his anger and hurt in a way that was clear, direct, and powerful. He explained that the goal wasn't to fight, but to make them understand the gravity of their actions and the impact it had on Jordan. He wanted them to face the consequences of their behavior, to take responsibility for their actions, and to learn from their mistakes. The confrontation wasn't about winning a fight, it was about winning justice. Armed with this strategy, Jordan, with Mr. Silas's support, decided to confront Mark and his gang. They found them at their usual hangout spot, a secluded area behind the school. Mark and his friends were lounging around, their casual indifference a stark contrast to the seriousness of the situation. Jordan approached them, his heart pounding, his hands clenched. Mr. Silas remained a short distance away, his presence a silent reassurance. Jordan took a deep breath, summoning the courage he had been building over the past few days. He spoke calmly, clearly, and directly. He recounted the events of the previous day, describing the destruction of his bike, the racial slurs, and the humiliation he had endured. He didn't shout or yell. He spoke with a quiet intensity, his words carrying the weight of his pain and his anger. Mark and his friends initially scoffed, attempting to dismiss Jordan's accusations with their usual arrogance and indifference. But as Jordan continued to speak, his voice gaining strength and conviction, their demeanor began to shift. They saw the sincerity in his eyes, the depth of his pain, the unwavering resolve in his voice. The other boys started to look uncomfortable, their bravado gradually fading. Kevin, usually the most aggressive of the group, shifted his weight nervously, his eyes darting around. Even Mark, usually so confident and arrogant, seemed taken aback by Jordan's calm and controlled demeanor. Jordan didn't stop until he had fully expressed his feelings, until he had made it clear that their actions had consequences. He didn't seek revenge, he sought accountability. He wanted them to understand the harm they had caused, not just to him, but to the entire community. The confrontation wasn't a physical fight. It was a battle of wills, a clash of perspectives. And Jordan, empowered by Mr. Silas's guidance and his own newfound resilience, emerged victorious. He had made them face the consequences of their actions, not through violence or retaliation, but through the power of his words, his courage, and his unwavering resolve. He had shown them, and himself, that he was stronger than they had thought. He had shown them that silence was not an option. He had found his voice, and he would not be silenced. The confrontation with Mark and his gang wasn't the end of the story. It was merely a turning point. While Jordan had successfully confronted the bullies, making them face the consequences of their actions, the incident needed to be addressed on a broader level. Mr. Silas, with his deep understanding of the community and its dynamics, knew that a formal complaint was necessary. He guided Jordan through the process of reporting the incident to the school principal, Ms. Evans. Mr. Silas's presence provided Jordan with the support and confidence he needed to articulate the events clearly and concisely. He helped Jordan focus on the facts, avoiding emotional outbursts or unnecessary details. He emphasized the importance of presenting a clear and coherent account of the incident, highlighting the racial slurs and the deliberate destruction of property. Ms. Evans, a woman known for her fairness and impartiality, listened attentively to Jordan's account. She didn't dismiss his claims or minimize the severity of the situation. She acknowledged the seriousness of the incident, recognizing the racial element and the deliberate act of vandalism. She assured Jordan that she would take appropriate action. The next step was to involve the parents of the bullies. Ms. Evans, with Mr. Silas's support, contacted each family, explaining the situation and outlining the school's disciplinary procedures. The parents' reactions were varied. Some were apologetic, expressing remorse for their children's actions and promising to take appropriate measures. Others were defensive, attempting to minimize their children's culpability or blaming Jordan for provoking them. Regardless of their reactions, Ms. Evans made it clear that the school would not tolerate such behavior. She outlined the consequences for the bullies, which included suspension, community service, and mandatory counseling sessions. She also emphasized the importance of educating the students on issues of racism, tolerance, and respect. The disciplinary actions taken by the school sent a clear message. Racism and bullying would not be tolerated. It was a significant step towards creating a more inclusive and respectful learning environment. The school also implemented additional measures to address bullying and promote diversity and inclusion. Beyond the school's actions, the incident gained traction within the wider community. News of the attack spread, sparking discussions about racism, bullying, and the importance of accountability. Many community members expressed their support for Jordan, condemning the bully's actions and commending his courage in confronting them. The incident became a catalyst for change, prompting conversations about tolerance, respect, and the need for a more inclusive society. The consequences for Mark and his gang extended beyond the school. Their parents faced criticism from the community, and some faced legal repercussions for their children's actions. The incident served as a stark reminder of the importance of raising children who are respectful, responsible, and accountable for their actions. It highlighted the need for parents to take an active role in shaping their children's behavior and values. The incident served as a wake-up call for the community, prompting reflection on its own role in perpetuating racism and intolerance. It was a turning point, a moment of reckoning that would ultimately lead to positive change. News of Jordan's ordeal and the subsequent confrontation spread rapidly through the community. What began as a private act of violence quickly transformed into a public conversation about racism, bullying, and the importance of standing up for what's right. The initial shock and outrage gave way to a wave of support for Jordan, a collective expression of solidarity that transcended racial and socioeconomic boundaries. The outpouring of support was immediate and overwhelming. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers reached out to Jordan, offering words of encouragement, comfort, and solidarity. They expressed their admiration for his courage in confronting the bullies, his resilience in the face of adversity, and his unwavering commitment to justice. Many shared their own stories of similar experiences, creating a sense of shared understanding and collective strength. The local church organized a community meeting, bringing together residents to discuss the incident and its implications. The meeting was a powerful display of unity, with people from all walks of life expressing their condemnation of the bullies' actions and their support for Jordan. The meeting wasn't just about condemning the bullies. It was about fostering a sense of community, a shared commitment to creating a more inclusive and just society. Local businesses also showed their support. Several offered Jordan gift certificates, discounts, and other forms of assistance. One local bakery donated a large cake, decorated with the message, "We stand with Jordan." A local bookstore offered him a gift certificate, encouraging him to find solace and inspiration in books. The gestures, both big and small, demonstrated the community's collective commitment to supporting Jordan and condemning the actions of the bullies. The local newspaper published an article about the incident, highlighting Jordan's courage and resilience. The article also included statements from community members, expressing their support for Jordan and their condemnation of the bullies' actions. The article sparked a wider conversation about racism and bullying, prompting discussions about the importance of tolerance, respect, and creating a more inclusive community. Social media also played a significant role in amplifying the message of support. A hashtag #WeStandWithJordan, quickly went viral, with people from across the country expressing their solidarity. The hashtag became a symbol of hope and resilience, a testament to the power of community and the importance of standing up against injustice. The outpouring of support wasn't just about offering material assistance or expressing sympathy. It was about creating a sense of belonging, a feeling of being valued and accepted. It was about demonstrating that Jordan wasn't alone, that he was surrounded by a community that cared, a community that stood with him. It was a powerful reminder that even in the face of adversity, the human spirit can prevail, fueled by the strength of community and the unwavering commitment to justice. The community's response wasn't just about fixing a broken bike. It was about repairing a broken community, mending the wounds of racism and intolerance, and building a more just and equitable future. The day Jordan returned to school felt different. The weight of the previous week's events still lingered, but it was lighter now, less oppressive. The outpouring of community support, the successful confrontation with his bullies, and the school's disciplinary actions had instilled in him a newfound sense of confidence and resilience. He rode Midnight Rider to school, the gleaming blue frame a symbol of his renewed spirit. The bike wasn't just a machine. It was a testament to his strength, his perseverance, and his unwavering belief in himself. He wasn't sure what to expect. Would Mark and his gang try to provoke him? Would they continue their harassment? He knew he couldn't predict their behavior, but he felt prepared. He had Mr. Silas's guidance, the support of his community, and most importantly, the strength within himself. He wouldn't be intimidated. He wouldn't be silenced. As he entered the school, he noticed a palpable shift in the atmosphere. There was a sense of cautious anticipation, a recognition that things had changed. His classmates greeted him with a mixture of respect and admiration. Some offered words of encouragement, others simply nodded in acknowledgement. The incident had brought about a change in the school's dynamics, a heightened awareness of the issue of bullying and racism. He saw Mark and his gang in the hallway. They were together, but their usual swagger was gone. Their faces were downcast, their demeanor subdued. They avoided his gaze, their usual arrogance replaced by a sense of shame and apprehension. He didn't approach them. He didn't need to. The confrontation had already taken place. The consequences had already been delivered. Their behavior had changed, not because of fear, but because they had been made to face the consequences of their actions. During classes, he focused on his studies, his mind clear and focused. He wasn't distracted by the fear or anxiety that had plagued him before. He was present, engaged, and confident. He participated actively in class discussions, contributing insightful comments and thoughtful observations. He was no longer the quiet, withdrawn student who had been targeted by the bullies. He was a confident, articulate young man who wasn't afraid to speak his mind. At lunch, he sat with Maya and their friends, engaging in lively conversations and sharing jokes. He felt a sense of belonging, a feeling of acceptance that he hadn't experienced before. He was surrounded by friends who valued him for who he was, not for the color of his skin. Later that day, he saw Mark and Kevin in the library. They were sitting alone, their heads bowed, their demeanor subdued. He didn't approach them, but he saw a flicker of recognition in their eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the change that had taken place. They weren't just bullies. They were young men who had been made to confront their actions and their prejudices. As he rode Midnight Rider home that evening, he felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced his bullies, he had overcome his fear, and he had emerged stronger and more confident. He had found his voice, he had found his strength, and he had found his way. The journey had been challenging, but he had learned valuable lessons about resilience, community, and the importance of standing up for what's right. He was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing he had the support of his community, the wisdom of Mr. Silas, and most importantly, the unwavering belief in himself. He was Jordan, and he was ready to ride. Weeks turned into months. The incident with Mark and his gang faded into the background, becoming a memory rather than a defining experience. But the lessons learned remained, etched into Jordan's heart and mind. He often found himself reflecting on the events, analyzing the various aspects of the experience, and identifying the key takeaways. He realized the profound impact of community support. The outpouring of love and solidarity from his neighbors, friends, and even strangers had been instrumental in his recovery. It had shown him the power of collective action, the strength that comes from knowing you're not alone in your struggle. He understood the importance of reaching out for help, of seeking support when needed. He learned that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. He also understood the importance of resilience, the ability to bounce back from adversity, to overcome challenges, and to emerge stronger on the other side was essential. He had faced immense emotional and psychological trauma, but he had persevered. He had found the strength within himself to confront his bullies, to speak his truth, and to fight for justice. He realized that resilience wasn't about avoiding hardship. It was about facing it head-on, learning from it, and growing stronger because of it. He also learned the importance of standing up against injustice. He had witnessed firsthand the devastating impact of racism and bullying, and he had chosen to fight back. He had confronted his bullies, reported the incident to the school authorities, and sought justice. He understood that silence was not an option, that inaction was complicity. He learned that it was his responsibility, and everyone's responsibility, to speak out against injustice, to challenge prejudice, and to fight for a more equitable and just world. He often visited Mr. Silas at his workshop, not just for repairs but for conversation and guidance. Their bond had deepened over time, forged in shared experiences and mutual respect. Mr. Silas had become more than just a mentor. He was a friend, a confidant, a source of wisdom and support. One afternoon, as they sat in the workshop, Midnight Rider gleaming in the background, Mr. Silas spoke, his voice filled with pride and affection. "You've come a long way, Jordan," he said. "You've shown incredible strength, resilience, and courage. You've learned valuable lessons, and you've inspired many others." Jordan smiled, his heart filled with gratitude. He knew he still had much to learn, much to overcome. But he also knew he wasn't alone. He had Mr. Silas, his community, and most importantly, himself. He had learned the importance of community, resilience, and standing up against injustice. He had found his voice, his strength, and his way. And he was ready to ride into the future, confident and empowered. He looked at Mr. Silas, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey, their mutual respect, and the enduring bond they had forged in the face of adversity. The repair of a bicycle had led to the repair of a spirit, the mending of a community, and the fostering of a brighter future. The journey had been challenging, but the lessons learned, the bonds formed, and the strength gained would stay with him forever.